Welcome to MacStories Unwind, a weekly review of everything MacStories and more. Today's show is brought to you by Calorie from Fun Media. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, of course, is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know, we're working our way through August. I look at the calendar every day, and I see the days ticking off, and it makes me a little anxious. That's the one thing about our summers, is that our summers are a time for anxiety as the OS releases come closer and closer, and we're not quite finished with our reviews, but we're getting there. We're both getting there, I think.
Don't be anxious. Don't think about it. Embrace the fact
I'll try not to.
that everything is weird and late this year. And the more you believe it, the more it'll come true. Because if you keep hoping that iOS 14 will be delayed, eventually it will. So,
all right. Well, so we're going to do this through sheer willpower, I guess.
Willpower and the power of hope. That's all that we have.
We have the power of hope on our side. All right. Well, it is a topsy-turvy 2020. We don't know what's going to happen.
Wait, what is it? What
topsy-turvy.
Topsy-turvy. What does that mean?
We'll save that one for a MacStories Unplugged for club members.
Nicely done. Nicely so. Right. For those unaware, Club MacStories members, they get access to a podcast that comes out about twice a month called MacStories Unplugged, which is a behind-the-scenes look at what we do at MacStories, what we're working on, how we feel, just behind-the-scenes look at, the two of us, essentially. And a recurring segment at this point of the show is me trying to learn and master American expressions,
yes,
and American sayings. And I think I'm doing pretty well in that regard. Topsy-turvy. All I know about topsy-turvy is that it's a Pokemon move.
Okay, all right.
So I feel like it. I don't know. We'll talk about it on the next episode.
The move might help you get there part ways.
See, I don't even know what the move does because I really hate the Pokemon that has that move. So,
that's your homework. Add that Pokemon to your team and
topsy-turvy. Okay, I'll save it in the notes for Unplugged.
All right, Federico. It is August, and that means there's not a lot of news. It's been a strange August as well. Some weeks have been kind of crazy. Some weeks have been totally quiet. And today or this week was very quiet. We didn't have a lot of news. But we had a couple of reviews on the site, and I thought I would let you go first and talk about a review that I did for a change.
Yes, you did an in-depth story on all the changes coming to Apple Maps in 2020. So that includes iOS and iPadOS 14, as well as macOS Big Sur. So again, this is part of our preview series that we're doing this summer, taking a look at some of the major features coming in all the Apple OSs and all the updates that are coming out at some point this fall. And as far as Apple Maps goes, you talked about a few major features here. First of all, is the expansion of the new Apple Maps and sort of what Apple is doing with the new maps and the new data that powers those maps. And of course, we saw a few months ago that continental US was completed. I believe in last winter, maybe.
It was in January, I think.
It was in January. Just last week, we saw the new Apple Maps debut in Japan. So a selection of cities in Japan, I believe Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, I want to say.
Yes.
They got the new Apple Maps. So with improved data sets as well as what's called Look Around. So Look Around, really, really excellent. Personally, I think superior alternative to Google Street View. I really prefer the way that Look Around in Apple Maps works and looks to Street View. And one of the funny and really interesting differences between Look Around between Japan and the US that you also cover in your stories are in Japan, you have what's it called, like street level, like walkaway level imagery.
So it's not, if you look at the US, if you use Look Around in the cities in the US that have it, it's based on they're all images that were taken from a vehicle on a street. Right. So it's all, you can look left and right and go down a street and see the businesses and buildings on the sides and all that sort of thing. In Japan, and it's not everywhere in Japan, but at least in one park in Osaka, they followed footpaths too. And we've seen things online. I mean, there have been tweets where there have been people wearing backpacks that are gathering data for Apple Maps, and they've got these backpacks with this equipment coming off of them that's taking pictures and recording the surroundings, and that's I assume how they're doing this. And it's kind of an interesting twist that we haven't seen yet, and I hope it spreads further to other countries as well, where you'll get more look around data for big parks, or maybe any kind of I guess point of interest in a country that's not really full of streets. So maybe it could be a big venue, an outdoor festival venue, or whatever it might be. But that rolled out in Japan, and I really like it.
Yeah, it's really nicely done. And of course, the new Apple Maps are also expanding by the end of the year to the UK, Ireland, and Canada. So it's not clear how they will roll out the new maps to those countries, especially Canada, which is a big country, or
Right.
so I hear. I've looked on
It's very
Google
big.
Earth. It's a very big country. So we'll see how they roll it out there. And some of the other new features, you also cover those coming in iOS 14. Refine location. So I understand that this is only available in cities where look around is also available. And the idea would be that if you find yourself in a place where GPS coverage is kind of poor, especially because you may be surrounded by tall buildings, what you can do in iOS 14, and this is kind of wild when you think about it, you can use your iPhone's camera to look around you and capture the buildings around you. And iOS 14 and Apple Maps will compare what your camera is seeing and will match that against images that they have stored in Look Around, and they will use that to refine your location, which is, they're using machine learning and AI there to basically say, okay, let's see what the user is seeing right now. Let's compare that to our database of imagery captured for Look Around so that we can refine the user's location. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly how it works, and it's really cool. I mean, think of it a little bit as Face ID for maps, because
Face
it's
ID
a lot
for buildings.
right, exactly, for buildings, because even the icon that you see in the screenshots is a little bit like the Face ID icon. So if you've got a weak signal, you're prompted. There's a circle that shows that your location is not that precise, and it prompts you to tap it and then hold up your phone and scan the horizon across from the direction you're facing. And I actually tested this because Look Around is in the Chicago suburbs, and it happens to be in my neighborhood. And so what I did is I did it from inside the house, which wasn't ideal, but I wasn't going to go all the way downtown Chicago to see if it was working or not working down there. So I stood inside my house where the GPS wasn't very good, and I kind of faked it from there and did it that way. But it works. It works really well in terms of getting it started. Whether it did not recognize the insides of my house, though, so Apple's going to have to send somebody over and photograph my living room before we get that figured out exactly. But
so what's also new in Maps and coming in 14? So cycling directions. We talked about this in June when after the WWDC keynote. Proper support for cycling directions in Maps with support for elevation, and you also have a toggle in Maps to say, let me avoid hills or busy areas, so that maybe I can have a safe trip with my bike. Really well done. Of course, this is also limited to a selection of cities at launch. I suppose it's going to be a couple of years since I'm going to have this feature in Italy.
True.
And unfortunately, this is often the case with new Apple Maps features.
it gives you a while to buy a bike, Federico.
Sure, or to buy an electric vehicle, because also that
True.
some changes are happening there as well. EV routing, I think. So this means that when you're planning a trip to a destination, you're going to have an option to see chargers along the way, and I believe you can also filter those directions based on the type of charger that your EV requires. Right?
That's correct. That's what Apple has said. Some of these features really are not widespread yet, including EV routing. I have not seen that. And cycling is only showing up in select locations like San Francisco right now, too. Not even all the cities that they announced at WWDC. But this stuff is rolling out over the course of the beta, so I expect we'll see a lot more of it before the fall.
And we also have city guides. So city guides, these are third-party guides that will be available inside Apple Maps. Again, for selected cities and destinations, you will be able to see these guides, which are essentially like a glorified version of the guides that you could already make yourself by picking a bunch of points of interest and putting them together in effectively a folder inside Apple Maps and then sharing that collection with somebody else, which I did before. If you remember, John, when I did my story, the iPhone 11 Pro photography review around Rome, I saved all of the locations that I photographed in my story, and I put them in an Apple Maps collection, and I shared that with readers. And now with city guides, it's basically the same idea. So you can collect Apple and third-party partners will collect a bunch of locations, make them available in guides that you can find in Apple Maps, and you can tap and click on the different points of interest to save them to your favorite locations and whatnot. But in addition to those points of interest, you will also have notes. So written explanation as to why that particular bar or restaurant or point of interest should be on your radar.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's photos as well. And when you open up a guide, it will drop all the pins across the map, and they usually have some sort of, a specific icon from the SF symbols. For instance, you can see a guide of the best ice cream parlors in New York City, and they'll have a bunch of ice cream cones scattered across the city, and you can work your way from one to the other. And they're really nicely done. Right now, these guides are in San Francisco, where there are about 24 of them, and another 3 in New York City. So it's a little thin right now, but again, that's another thing that's rolling out. They're supposed to also be in London and LA at launch, but last time I looked, which was earlier today, they weren't in those 2 cities yet.
And also there's some changes related to privacy, John, especially when it comes to the granting permission to Apple Maps to use your location, right? You can choose between what's it called, like a precise location mode and a more
approximate, I think they call it.
Approximate location, yeah. Well, how does that work?
So it's just a matter of degree as to how precise the location is. So, for instance, if you think about it, if you are interested in learning about concerts in your town, an app doesn't need to know where you're standing right now. They don't need to know where you live. They just need to know generally that you live in this part of Rome or something like that. Or maybe even that you just live in Rome at all. And so that is another layer of precision for lack of precision, I guess, for apps to apply that, allows people to protect their precise location if they so choose. And in maps, the way that is surfaced is that if you select approximate location, instead of that really small blue dot that's right where you're standing, you'll get a big circle. And when I did that and turned it on, it, to give you a sense for the size of the area, it captured probably 3 towns around where I live. So it was maybe, I don't know, a circle 10 miles across or something like that. So it's definitely a lot more imprecise, but a lot of apps don't need more precision than that. Of course, maps, if you want to do things like turn-by-turn directions, you need to have precise location. So if you were in maps and you had turned on approximate location, and then you wanted to do turn-by-turn directions, it would then prompt you to up the precision to precise location so that you could actually use that feature. All right, Federico, let's move on because we have a couple more things. The next one is Ryan did a review of an app called Portal this week, and Portal 3.0 came out. It is a Soundscape app. It's a little, we've talked in the past about things like dark noise and other, I guess, white noise and background noise type of apps. Portal has a bunch of sounds that are based on locations around the globe. Now, originally, there were, I think, 19 of these sounds. And with 3.0, the company has added 25 more. So there are a whole bunch of sounds from the Scottish Highlands, from the Slovenian Alps, And then coming up soon, they're going to be releasing more sounds from Devon and Cornwall in the UK. So these are very much localized types of sounds that you can listen to. And when you play them, you get a visualization on your iPad or your iPhone. You can see like a scene from that part of the world, which helps you kind of visualize and picture where they're from. And at the same time, it can also control hue lights. So it's a whole experience essentially that is nice for if you want to focus or relax or whatever it happens to be. I think that the developer is working on an Apple TV app too, which strikes me as perfect for this, especially if they coupled it with a slideshow of multiple images from wherever the sounds are from, or maybe video or whatever it happens to be. But because they added all these new sounds, they've kind of changed the way they're organized and how you go from one sound to the other. You can pick favorites, you can reorder them, that sort of thing. I know Ryan's been using it since pretty early this year and really loves it. And so I downloaded it this week and started trying it. And it's a really nice app. I like having the variety of having, 2 or 3 of these kinds of apps at any one time, so that if I get maybe a little tired of one, I can kind of move to the other and then cycle through them one at a time.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, I gotta check it out myself too. Ryan also wrote about the new Apple Music for Web beta. So it appears that now Apple is going to do this every summer, essentially ahead of the changes coming to music in iOS and iPadOS 14, namely the new Listen Now page and some visual refreshes to some visual changes to the sidebar and iconography here and there in the app. Apple has also relaunched the Apple Music Web beta that incorporates those features. So you can now try it for yourself. Go to the Apple Music Web beta page, and you will find the Listen Now page with the top picks at the top of the screen instead of the algorithmic playlists. All the changes that are coming in iOS 14 in that Listen Now page, which is the main page of Apple Music, are available for testing on the web as well. And I think it looks pretty good. I don't use it. I know that, however, there's a lot of especially Windows users who don't have a native Apple Music client that like using Apple Music via web browser. So it's good that Apple is thinking ahead here, and those new features are already being tested. And supposedly, if they do what they did last year, the main Apple Music web version will be updated in September or October whenever iOS 14 comes out.
Right. Yeah, I like it a lot too. I mean, it's reminiscent of the betas, and it looks nice. And back in the day, I used to really rely on these sorts of cross-platform solutions like this. So it's nice that we have it. I want to mention too briefly that we had an interview this week on AppStories, which is again part of our summer series in previewing the OS releases in the fall, and that was with David Smith. And we talked to David all about widgets, and as you can imagine, watchOS, because almost no one knows more than David about this, I think probably other than the watchOS engineers at Apple. And a lot of interesting insights about all those things, as well as some previews of an app that he's working on for the fall. So take a listen to AppStories and hear about that app, as well as what Dave thinks is coming down the pipeline for watchOS and widgets as well.
So coming in MacStories Weekly for Club MacStories members this week, John, we have another home screen. So we asked a few weeks ago, we asked to our members, hey, if you have an interesting home screen on your iPhone and iPad because of widgets in iOS and iPadOS 14, send us your home screen, and we will feature the more interesting ones, with some particular layout and design choices, perhaps. So this week we have another member home screen, and I don't know about you, John, but it's been really fun to dig through all the submissions that we got to steal some of the ideas
definitely
that members have implemented already. And it's always fun to look around at wallpapers and apps that people use, and sometimes I discover some really interesting gems that I didn't stumble upon myself. You also did a collection, John, about music utilities, and there's some really friendly names in here. So
Definitely.
you picked a bunch of websites such as Pitchfork and Chorus. You also picked MusicBot, and specifically MusicBot Pro, which is the club-only version of my Apple Music shortcut MusicBot, which I will tell you, John, I'm waiting for shortcuts to get better in iOS 14
Mm-hmm.
before I touch MusicBot again. But it's something that I want to do. I want to clean it up in a bunch of places, and I want to make it more powerful. But first, I need shortcuts to get better in the iOS 14 beta. So we'll see how things go there. So you picked music websites, MusicBot Pro, and then a bunch of music utilities. So all of these I use or I've used myself. SongShift to move your playlists between different music streaming services. Of course, Apple Music and Spotify are the two more popular ones, but SongShift supports a lot of them. I believe it also supports Tidal, Amazon Music, all these services. Music Harbor, which is the really like one of my favorite iPhone apps, period, to keep track of new and upcoming music releases. Really excellent utility. And from the same developer of Music Harbor, his name is Marcos Tanaka, Music Smart, which came out a few months ago. I reviewed Music Smart on MacStories. It's this really interesting idea. It's an app and action extension that allows you to get more details and metadata about anything you may be listening to in music on your iPhone or iPad. So essentially, if you miss credits, if you're one of those people like me who used to purchase albums as CDs or vinyls years ago, you know how they had those liner notes inside with all the details, like who's the producer, who's the mixing engineer, and where was this song recorded. Music Smart is the utility you've been looking for. It's got all that data plus more, because it's also like a modern web integrated utility. So it looks into a bunch of online databases to give you even more info and like related videos and all that kind of stuff. Really well done. I love this idea for a collection, John.
Well, thank you very much, Federico. It's a lot of fun. It's the kind of thing that I use all the time, whether it's those sites or those apps, just to stay on top of what's coming out for music. Because, you and I both, I think, listen to an awful lot of music during the course of the year while we're working. All right, Federico. Also in the club newsletter this week, Ryan wrote a story about Apple Podcasts on iOS 14. And a little bit in particular, he has a story about the Listen Now aspect of that and the feature. Yep. So I don't want to spoil it, but that's what he had. Plus, we had a bunch of links and apps and Q&A in this issue as well. Okay, Federico, before we get to our Unwind picks for this week, I want to tell you about our sponsor for this episode, and that is Calorie by Fun Media. I don't know if you know this, Federico, but Fun Media is based right here in the Chicago area. So this is
your friends. Yeah. They're local. They're local.
Absolutely.
Too.
These are locals. So these guys are near and dear to my heart. Calorie is a calorie counter and tracker that just makes it super simple to track your calories and figure out what you're consuming and live a little healthier. And, to me, it's one of the most important things about an app like this, and is that it be super simple to input the data. And Calorie is absolutely that. There's a big plus button right at the bottom, and you tap it, and then there's a whole bunch of ways to get the information in. You can do it manually. You can scan barcodes. There's a database of foods in there. And then once you've entered those meals and those things you've eaten, you've got a great visualization right in the main page that gives you a sense for where you happen to be along the timeline of what you want to consume and what your limits are. So you know whether you're kind of maybe had a little too much or maybe have a lot of room for the rest of the day to have a nice dinner, whatever it happens to be. It's all there on that home screen. Now, you can also dig in a little deeper. There's a journal view, which gives you kind of a day-by-day snapshot of exactly what you've done. But it's that clutter-free interface that lets you monitor kind of on a daily, weekly, monthly, and even yearly basis that allows you to spot trends and figure out where you stand to try to live a healthier life. You also can track other statistics, things like carbs, proteins, fats, sodium, and a whole bunch more. And it's great because not only is the app super easy to use, but it's everywhere. It's on the iPhone, it's on the iPad, it's on the Apple Watch, and it's even on the Mac as a Mac Catalyst app. So, check this out. You can learn more about the apps at calorie.app, and we'll have a link in the show notes to download the app. Check it out. It's a great way to figure out exactly what you've been eating and track it going forward. Our thanks to Calorie for the support of Unwind. All right, Federico, let's dive into the Unwind picks. We got a couple of interesting ones, a little different than we've been doing lately. So why don't you start?
Yeah, so I have a bit of a different pick this time in that it's not a TV show, it's not a game, it's not an app, it's not music. It's an Instagram account. So I came across this artist on Instagram earlier this week, a few days ago. And I really like what she creates. So her name is Alora, and I'm going to get this wrong, and I apologize, Alora Potrat.
Sounds right to me.
Yeah, goes by Owakita on Instagram. So what Alora does is really remarkable and amazing. So she creates this pastel, sort of dreamlike, Japan-inspired wallpapers and photos. So basically, I spent like 30 minutes just looking at the profile on Instagram. I was immediately captured by the wallpapers and the photos. They're so like, Laura uses all these pink and purple and blue tones that really create this dreamlike sense for scenes that are typical of Japan, places like Tokyo and Kyoto and Osaka. And Laura has a Patreon page, which I immediately signed up for, where you can download the wallpapers for your iPhone and iPad. You can also download, I believe Laura offers like PSD files if you want to look into the details of the photographs and the wallpapers. Currently using a wallpaper of like a typical Kyoto street as my lock screen wallpaper. And I've always been fascinated myself by Japanese culture, but also Japanese landscapes and the contrast that you see in places like Kyoto, where you have these modern buildings and modern architecture, but also this more almost country-like, houses and temples. And I really like, and the combination of that and the cherry trees, and I just think it's beautiful. And I grew up reading manga, and so these typical landscapes of like the high school and the small streets and the phone cables running overhead. These wallpapers, they speak to me, right? They capture images that have been etched in my brain for decades at this point, and so to have them as my iPhone wallpapers, I think they're really beautiful. So Laura does amazing work. This is not exactly like, personally speaking, I enjoy just sitting down and spending like an hour trying different wallpapers and setting up my phone so that it looks pretty. It relaxes me. Maybe it doesn't relax other people, but it does the job for me. So go check out Alora on Instagram and go check out the Patreon. Really, really incredible work. And if you like Japan, as I do, and one day I'll have to visit Japan because I've only seen the photographs and the pictures, I think this is going to be right up your alley as well.
That's a great pick. I've always wanted to go to Japan as well. And for a while there, I had this grand plan that I would go check out Nintendo World that was opening this summer. But, the pandemic got in the way of that. But I do have a Nintendo pick for you, Federico, which is Paper Mario, the Origami King, which is the latest edition of Paper Mario for the Switch, which just came out, I guess I want to say 3 weeks ago, maybe. And I've really been enjoying it. I haven't played a ton of it because you and I have been kind of busy lately, but I do like to take a half an hour or an hour every couple of days in the evening and just relax and play this game. It is not a hard game. It is not a complicated game. It's perfect for if you're someone who's kind of busy and is concerned that if you put down a game for 2 weeks, you're not going to remember what to do when you pick it back up. Paper Mario is not a problem with that. It's really simple, but it's beautifully designed. The imagery in it is fantastic. It's got fun, cute mechanics. It's, a series of puzzles and finding your way through various levels of the game and solving the puzzles and trying to save the princess, as is always the case with the Mario game. But it has the great 2D graphics that come along with the Paper Mario series. And I've just really been enjoying it because it's a very low stress, low key, fun game. And you could burn through this super fast and be done. But I feel like these are the kind of games where it's better just to snack on them, in a sense, where it's like you play for an hour, maybe you play for 2 hours, and then you put it down and you come back and just enjoy the process of playing it and kind of leisurely going from one spot to another. And I've been having a lot of fun with this the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, really nice pick. It's also downloaded on my Switch, and I plan on starting to play that very soon.
Very good. All right, Federico. Well, that's it for this week. I want to thank our sponsor again, and that is Calorie. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net. And, of course, Federico is on Instagram and Twitter, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next Friday, Federico.
Ciao, John.